everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. Monday night, we are back in action after a win, after a pretty good weekend overall, I would say. Nice weather and everything over here in Chicago. I am your host, as always, Timuchin here in Chicago, and with us is the usual gang. Let's start with Bickler. Bickler, what's happening?
What's happening? It's Monday. Last week, my kids were out of school sick all week and then got better just in time to give it to me over the weekend. So I'm here with a terrible ear infection. Just
Still?
barely a lot. Yeah, I'm going to the doctor's tomorrow. I'm like one of those people that like believes in the beauty of modern medicine, but like doesn't like going to use it.
Doesn't use it.
No, right. Like a combination of like a new liberal man and my old man.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. Like we were just talking about this with Angel, actually. I hate taking medicine because I've always been paranoid, like painkillers and stuff like that, because I'm always paranoid that, hey, if I take a painkiller for that, like I'll say, like, I have a headache. Angel will like, did you take anything? I'm like, no, because my body will beat this. Like,
right. You don't want to start taking that. Next thing you know, you're Brett Favre.
Yes. You know what the funny thing is? I use the same name. And Gally is with us, all pilled up, I'm sure. What's happening?
Zero painkillers up in this piece, let me tell you right now. I'm very lucky to say that I'm through two major surgeries. I would basically either pour them down the drain, and then I did that once, and someone told me exactly how much money I wasted, because I know myself well enough to know, like, if there's something you can, like, probably overindulge in, I will probably find a way to do it, whether it's gambling, having a drink or two, or whatever it is. So I kind of feel like painkillers and me were never going to work. That, and again, I don't exactly carry the weight that allows you to throw too many painkillers down. But I did. I had major reconstructive surgery, and I had an unlimited Viking and codeine prescription. So needless to say, some people in Keene, New Hampshire, they got the benefit of that once I realized how much that was worth.
That's nice. Brian Sheldon says, Stormy here, still searching. Yeah, I wonder if the storm actually helps, Brian. If you're not familiar, if you're not on our Discord channel, Brian's dog said, and you know, we've made fun of Brian in the past, how he lives like a Unabomber in the middle of a field, and so it's like wide open fields and stuff like that, and his dogs were missing. We're still looking for the second one. There are some sightings, but I wonder if the storm will help in terms of, because God knows when it storms over here, Stitch and Leo want to be within touching distance, so I wondered if that in some ways helps. And Ryan, who has been missing in action, and now this explains why he has been missing in action, he's in Mexico. Dry, sandy, and tacos. Tacos is the only part that sounds good out of the three, but what are you gonna do? Hey, I'm actually, that should be interesting. You were there in Cinco de Mayo, by the way. But yes, so no painkillers, but you might need some painkillers after this, people. Trivia is in the house. Okay, this is an easy one. You guys are gonna nail this. We'll start with Bickler, but Harvey had an awesome game. Man of the match to a huge majority on Instagram, on our post, as well as on Facebook. Harvey was the second youngest player to play for Liverpool. Do you know who is first? Who is third as a tiebreaker? Bickler, we'll start with you. Harvey was 16 years, 5 months, 21 days old when he wore.
So we're looking for the first and the third?
Correct, because Harvey was second. I gave you the second.
Ben Woodburn.
I think Ben at the time was the youngest to score. I think that's what's throwing you off. He is in here, but he's like 9.
All right, one's got to be Raheem Sterling. Raheem the Dream. Those are my two guesses. I would have said Ben Woodburn and Raheem Sterling.
Sterling. What do you have, Gally?
The answer, if I'm right, this is a total guess. I think, isn't it the Sinclair kid that ended up selling tacos literally by the sea, like after he was out of football by the time he was 20-something?
He's only played like 5 games for. He played a lot for U21, and I remember at the time, that's why I never get excited about the
Jerome Sinclair, right?
Yes, Jerome Sinclair. He was actually played in 5 games, 1 goal, I think, if I remember right over here. Let's pull it up. But he did play a lot for the U21s. He has like 30 appearances for them, 9 goals, 5 assists, and stuff like that. He did travel around a lot. He went to Bulgaria and stuff like that towards the end.
He hired a bad agent who forced his way out of Liverpool to go to Watford. And
yes, it was
Watford. If you're going to a club, don't go to one that literally has the management structure of like an ant. Like literally they fire a manager every 15 minutes. How could a kid ever make it through an academy like that and actually think it was going to work? But yeah, the Sinclair kid was one. Was it Ibe? Was Ibe in the top 3, or who was number 3?
Ibe is nowhere near. Ibe is actually
he was
15. Sterling is 11. This just happened. Like, just happened a few months.
Oh, Nioni.
Yes, Nioni was the 3rd. He was 16 years, 7 months. And then Jerome was 16 years and 6 days.
Unbelievable.
When he first started for Liverpool. What was that?
It's unbelievable that they gave him that chance at such a young age, and they had big hopes for him. And then he forced his way out of town, like literally the next summer, because he got a little taste of first-team football and was like, "Bleep this! I ain't going back to Kirby."
And that's I don't know if they came in and he saw the bag of money and he kind of was like going to run with it, and then he disappeared for good into somewhere in Bulgaria. But Harvey. So we'll definitely talk a lot about him today. And then I do want to ask you guys overall the performance. I guess let's start with you, Bickler. Good game overall. I personally think probably the best 60 minutes we played in the beginning, especially in terms of our press, winning the ball and stuff like that. Obviously, goals come, which was a nice change of pace. A lot of good performances out there. What do you take away from it, if anything?
I mean, it's amazing what happens when you prioritize a press, when you have a system built on winning the ball in the final third. Like, that was my takeaway from that first half. And I think, like, I don't know, I didn't want to like jinx it, but before the game, like, the atmosphere felt different. Like, it felt like there was a sense of urgency for the first time in a long time. Probably too late, right? But like, yeah, I just felt like it's interesting because I think the sense of urgency had less to do with winning anything, like winning a title, winning, chasing down or anything, and more to do with just like life or death. Like we needed to have this for ourselves, right? Just for getting through the year and for going into next year. So a lot of players with a lot of question marks over their head. I think they know that. As I said, I think in a lot of ways they're playing for the next regime as well.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that. I mean, I don't know how much of the performance do we give to us, how much of it do we give to Spurs and how they defend for one, and how much of it do we give to just suddenly lack of pressure and guys out there playing they're having fun as they play, as they keep saying. But Gally, out of the performances, let's start with that. Do you take anything and carry anything from this, or this is just going to be a blimp in the radar pretty soon?
So they still have some pride. They wanted to put a good performance in. They looked like shit last time they were at home in front of their home fans. And then they followed that up with putting a stinker into Everton, and then went on the road and played like crap in London. So like, I think they did have some pride there and they put it out on the pitch. I think Spurs, to your point, they can't get out of their own way the way we couldn't get out of our own way before we had the right players to defend the way that Klopp wanted to defend. Yet he continued to defend that way, even though it was Lovren and Sacco, and we would still play the high line like Virgil was there, and Matip. So I think when you have philosophies like Ange and Klopp, I think it's hard for a manager to – it was working really well for Spurs at the beginning of the year. So I understand why they've continued to go with what they have. They need to build around it, but they were also down like a few really key players in their defense specifically, and one being Udogie, who's been one of their players of the year. So, I mean, that's not why they lost, but Emerson Royale was the worst player on the entire pitch, and Mo torched him for an entire game. I mean, he almost did him on the little flick in the first half. Like, it was a rough afternoon for the left back. So I think we exploited them. And I kind of liked we had a little killer instinct in us. It looked like there in the first half. We looked like we wanted 5 in the first half. We only got 2.
And that's the thing. I mean, you look at that. I mean, it's like, mixed feelings, right? You watch that game, and part of you is like, man, nice, finally. But then at the same time, you're like, God damn it, where the hell was this 2 weeks ago? So it's kind of like a mixed watch, Pickler. But along the same lines, as I was watching, that's what I could not decide, because I've seen Spurs like midweek, and I kind of knew that we had an edge because they just played Thursday, and it was pretty much the same starting 11 they trotted out there on Sunday, it felt like. And how much of it is us? How much is it Spurs in terms of like the way we played? I mean, it almost felt like if Spurs asked us, how do you guys want us to play so you can really go out there and do well? This is probably what we would have said.
I mean, I would say it's all us, to be perfectly honest. I don't think it has anything to do with Spurs, because if you're telling me the way that we played for the last 4 or 5 weeks has everything to do with our opposition, like, I completely disagree with that. Like, we couldn't get the ball around the back without like making critical mistakes for the last 4 or 5 weeks. So the fact that I think like fundamentally it was sound football, like, I think is a drastic improvement from anything we've seen in the last like month. So I don't think it has as much to do with the way Spurs set up. Just like I don't think we were shite against Everton because I think Everton was better than us. You know what I mean? I just think we were dreadful. Like, so I guess for however you see it, I feel like we at least got it together enough to play like sound fundamental football up until the second half when we slept walk through the last bit.
Okay, like, so then staying with you though, if you're saying it's us, is it just rested legs? Is this just no pressure? If it's just all us, what do you think, or what is the difference then, you think?
I don't know what the difference is. If I had to guess, I would guess that there's been some serious conversations about like how they want the season to end at this point, and like less conversation about what they're up to win, and more conversation about like how do we get into next year in a way that we can bring some semblance of confidence and structure into the next season.
Yeah, that makes. I just felt like, if this was another team that sat back, Gally, kind of like Everton does, I just don't think this game it would be as easy. It's a Spurs team that plays kind of like what you said. They play a certain way and they play regardless if it's working or not, and they don't change it. They're like, this is how we play, kind of an ordeal. They don't say, hey, these guys are going to press the hell out of us, so let's play a long ball over them and see what we can get. If we can't get anything, we'll all park the bus behind the ball until we win again and we play the long ball again, kind of like what Everton does. So how much of that do you think it is, or do you agree with Bickler that it's like all us in terms of like why there was a huge change in the performance?
Well, I mean, so I'm not going to go as far as Bickler say it was all us, because I think Spurs have something to do with it. But I just think this is a prime example of like what good a goal from open play can mean to you in the first 20 minutes of a game when you haven't scored one in 3.5 months at home. What feels like, right? Like, they actually had opportunities. I mean, Andy Robertson scoring in back-to-back games. The world is about to freeze over, people. Like, it was 50 degrees here after it was 80 on Friday, and I was like, well, this makes sense. It makes sense. Andy Robertson just scored. Like, literally, I was waiting for, like, Satan to come out like it was South Park, was going to start singing and dancing. But it just didn't. It was kind of crazy. But I think a goal does that, though. I think that also, like, kind of changed things. I think having the goal early, the way they scored it, there was a little bit of elegance to it. You had Mo involved, you had Gakpo, you had Mo hitting that audacious little chip that he was clearly not trying to cross. That was a shot, and it goes off the top of the crossbar. I think they just they put their tails up early.
See, really? See, I thought that was a cross.
No, I thought he was trying to shoot that all day. I mean, if he was trying to pass that was Mo being as unselfish as I've seen Mo be, and he's been pretty damn selfish.
Really?
Right
See,
now.
I thought that was the outside of the foot to the back post cross that just did not take as much of the outside of the foot.
I thought he was actually trying to chip the keeper because he looks up and he sees him off his line, and I thought he was just trying to like audaciously chip it over him. But I could be totally wrong. Maybe that's just the romantic in me that remembers Mo doing audacious shit like that in the box and like trying to fucking make people look stupid. Unlike this guy.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought Mo for example, had an excellent game, and like you said, it's very difficult for me to. I was like before actually the game started in the pre-match. My main concern was that right side in terms of defending, but I mean, you got Bickler out of Harvey a Henderson like defensive performance, right? Like he did everything in there and going attacking wise more effective as well. And one thing I like about Harvey is I feel like he plays well with Mo because he releases the ball a lot sooner compared to Szoboszlai. Like if Mo is there, just give him the ball, have him 1-on-1, especially when it's Royale. But we've had other left backs that he could clearly take advantage of, and he doesn't have to get past them. He can just go at them and get them worried and get people shifting around and stuff like that. I feel like we don't do enough of that. Like we play against teams where their winger is terrorizing Trent and they're going at Robertson and stuff like that. Or whereas our wingers, sometimes Diaz goes astray all over the place and stuff. But going back to Elliott's, obviously a great performance, awesome goal. How does that impact next year, if at all?
Well, I think Elliott is kind of in the position that Jones was in, where like he's been the best player for an extended run now, right? Like across the board, it seems like, we talked about how he was the first guy off the bench, right? Because he was the one consistent, reliable, positive change you could make in a match for a long time when we were running through all the injuries. So I think he's got to be in serious consideration. And I don't know, like, here's the thing, like there's obviously been a conversation, like he played tactically very differently in this match than we've seen him play. So there is clearly a conversation. Whatever conversation that was, I wish would have happened 2.5 months ago. Anyway, like I think the interesting thing about Harvey Elliott is that like when he came on board, because of his pedigree and sort of how he was used in the academy, I feel like a lot of people were expecting to see Raheem Sterling. And I think his game is actually closer to McAllister's. If you actually really watch what he's good at and what he does well, he doesn't have that over the top end pace to take the top off. And that's why he doesn't work in the front three. But what he does have is he's just really technically gifted in the way he plays, and he's got really great vision. And those are the types of things that McAllister has utilized to made him into like a World Cup winning world-class midfielder. I think Harvey's very much in that same ballpark in terms of what his skills are and what he's good at.
Yeah, one thing he's a very smart player, and I think like he's probably the one that understands the system the best. Like Saidu says, and he said this before, and I agree, understand that Szoboszlai is not like designed for the system, perhaps. But one big difference I feel with like Elliott's compared to Szoboszlai, I think Szoboszlai is a much more talented player, especially physically more gifted player, Gally. But he does not play well he doesn't play within the system. He's almost playing his different game. He's like, obviously he's new. So Elliott has the advantage of having played in the system for years now. But I think that's like the biggest system where Szoboszlai sometimes try to do more than what the system asks of him to do. Whereas Elliott is going to pick his spots within that system, and he's going to do the defensive work. He's going to do the attacking. He's going to do the pressing. Not only his assists, he won the ball several times. That kind of like where the goals came from.
Yeah, I do agree. Sure, Elliott has a little advantage this time here. I also think that Szoboszlai, he could do the job if he really wanted to. It's not in his nature or his overall skill set. I think what Szoboszlai struggles from now is what Jones used to struggle from. Just trying to do too much with own like self talent and not playing within yourself and your role and knowing your job. And it turns the ball over in bad spots. Sometimes just makes the wrong decision that leads to players being out of position or hurting the players behind them. And I think Elliott does the job. I find it funny that we're now talking about Elliott being this perfect 4-3-3 player when he's just as much set up to be in a 4-2-3-1 as any player. I think both Nick and Paul were alluding to it. He's not a 4-3-3 winger that can beat people with pace, but he could easily play wide as he did in the championship and create and give you something depending on what your setup is. It's just what you're asking. What shocks me is the fact that he was able to slot in. I remember when he was getting those starts 2 years ago before the ankle injury, and I was like, this is crazy to me. Like, he is never playing the Jordan Henderson role. That is Harvey bleeping Elliott. We think he's a number 10 that should be like an attacker. We don't know what he is. And he's made himself into an all-around footballer who deserves all the credit in the world. I think Paul's, comparison to a young McAllister makes a lot of sense. I think their skills actually line up, and I hope Slot knows how to use them, because I feel like Harvey Elliott should be a big part of this machine going forward.
And that's the thing, with all this discussion, and obviously, like, Slot becoming more and more likely, it's kind of hard to tell who's going to be playing what role, because we don't even know how we're going to play and stuff like that. So when you look at the game yesterday, Bickler, and I'm going to get to Nunez probably next, but if you look at how Gakpo did, I mean, you see how Elliott's performance, but I kind of talked about this last Monday. I kind of find it really difficult to go out there and look out there and say, great, like, we have a piece, kind of like we did with Jones last year, because the system is going to change. All signs point to, based on Slot's history, that Gakpo is a lot more suitable player for him than a Nunez. But how much of it can we take from that front three? Because I still insist that I like Gakpo on the left a lot more than I like him in the middle. But at the same time, he is smart enough to have that movement, as opposed to, like, I don't know if you can put somebody else in the middle that will do the same in terms of like coming back to midfield, like pulling center backs all over the place.
Yeah, I think this is a system that has an opening at striker, and we have two strikers that like to drift left and play off the left elbow. So, I mean, two different shades of the same color in terms of like how they play, which is I think the tricky part, right? I mean, I think Gakpo does much better at kind of pulling in. I think Gakpo for a lot of us was like sort of the natural choice, because like, yeah, he has looked better on the left, right? But we need somebody to do this thing centrally. And when Gakpo came in and lit it up, what he reminded us of all was a bigger, stronger Bobby for all intents and purposes, maybe with less flair, but certainly more toughness and stability in there, and the ability to sort of hold that ball up in a way and spring counters the way that Bobby used to do. I don't know what the answer here is, man. I think Gakpo's, makes sense in the system coming up. I mean, I thought what they did well versus Spurs is, for the first time, they seemed to figure it out with Diaz, where Diaz, like, just basically they're like, hey, remember that guy Sadio Mane? Like, do that. Flip in, like, invert and let Gakpo come on the outside of your left shoulder. Like, that worked, right? And I just think, Diaz is such a traditional wide winger that he doesn't typically like, and that's what we loved him for, because he brought that width and would stretch people out when he ran at him. But now I think, for whatever, if you're playing it with Gakpo, that's got to be the move. So it'll be, at least in this system, it'll be interesting to see what Slot figures out in terms of how that works for them going forward.
I mean, with Gakpo, Gally, I mean, the thing that I keep reading, and like, I don't understand him. I'm assuming Nick is talking about Gakpo in terms of, like, winning duels and stuff. He gets a lot of flack for his pressing, but I think kind of like how doing that. We talked about this before when we compared Gakpo and Nunez, right? Their backgrounds. I mean, Bickler has talked about it in terms of, I was actually talking about it this morning. I kind of like compared it to an NBA player growing up here compared to European players coming over here. We're like, how are they so fundamentally sound and stuff like that? It's almost like there is more, whereas the other one is more based on, like, going up from street ball and playing a lot and physical ability and stuff like that, like Nunez is. And I think Gakpo's football, like, intelligence enables him to slide to the left, like Bickler is talking about. And it's the same way with the press. I feel like he presses a lot more smart, and he understands team pressing, because you saw Nunez come in, and then just running at people full speed is not pressing. I think people think, oh, he presses so well. No, he's not, because they're not. You're not playing against like U9s. They just pass the ball around you and you just out of the picture. Now you left us with a man behind. Whereas I feel like Gakpo knows when to press. He understands what the trigger is and, how to press as a team. So it's more effective than when Nunez is pressing, unless he scores with his balls. But that's about
Well, I mean, he definitely has over the last month that Darwin's been completely lost in his head and looks like the Darwin of the first 2 months he was here. But earlier in the season when Darwin had statistically some of the best like pressing numbers in the whole Premier League, and everyone was lauding him for how hard he was working and how he was fitting into the side. I think Darwin Nunez is, and Paul has said this before, he's such a raw talent. He's such an emotional problem. And maybe we'll get to the Instagram stuff. Maybe we won't. If we do, we can. If not, I wasn't trying to go there. But I think it's a microcosm of who he is. It's the red card against Crystal Palace the first time he was challenged by a center back in England, and he headbutts him for no reason. Like I think that he has so much growing up to do, and maybe he can't do it on this dollar or at this level or at this time. But I genuinely think it's hard to judge him. I think Gakpo at times looks like he knows how to press a lot better, but a month and a half ago, 3/4 of this fan base didn't want him playing because he looked like he gave 2 fucks when he came on a pitch against Man City with a chance to win a match. And basically, and let's be fair, he did walk around the park that afternoon like disinterested because I think he was a little lost in his own mind. I think when it all gets said and done, if we hit the true serum on all these players, the emotional roller coaster that was Jurgen Klopp's final farewell rock and roll tour took its toll on every one of these players in a different way. And I think we saw it with Mo. We saw it with Gakpo when he was lost because he went from having to play the 6, the 8, the 9, and the left wing in a 2-week period, and then losing his job for 2 months. So people could chant Darwin's name as he missed sitters because he was loved just until the fan base decided to hate him to the point where he had to take all of his pictures off social media because he has mental health issues. And I'm not laughing about that, actually, guys. I think this season has been one of these emotional roller coasters, and we talked about running out of gas, and I think these players have all run out of gas. So I think it's almost unfair right now to kind of be judging on who they are or what they did. This just felt like it was either going to be the greatest swan song or the wheels were going to come off. And unfortunately, they came off like 3.5 weeks early.
That's why in some ways I do like this. I do like it if we close out the season because it doesn't, at least you don't see the wheels going down the road. It's kind of like a bit more put together as we go out. But Brian says we all said he's a raw talent. There's so much potential there. I hope he finds a way to harness it. I'm not going to get too much into the Instagram story in terms of the Instagram and the social media aspect of it, because we did talk a lot about it this morning and like really pretty much covered it most of the show. But what I do want to talk about with you, Bickler, is how much more time, or just the new manager, new system, almost like, reboots the hard drive. And then so you can kind of like give him another shot. But how much more, as Nick says, when do we say, yeah, it's just not happening? Because we all want him to do well, because you see the efforts, you see the fights, and I think there's a lot of frustration that comes from that playing with emotion that Gally is talking about, right. That red card. And I really think, some of the recent frustrations has to be, if he is doing as much research on Slot and his system as much as I am, he's probably thinking, where the hell do I fit this next year too? And when you don't know where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing in 3 to 4 months, that kind of messes up with your head.
Well, to Nick's question, how old before Raw is unrealized? I don't think you put an age number on that, right? I think you put, like, we've used the comparison over and over again. 24 for Nunez is totally different than 24 for Gakpo.
Yeah.
Given how they came up in their backgrounds, right? I think there's there's socioeconomics that are involved in these things. It's not just I look at an age number and the amount of years he's been playing professional football and do that. I don't think we can answer this question until we see at least a season under the new manager, in my opinion. But what I am tired of, I'm tired of talking about this because, like, this whole season, this entire team has struggled to finish. And the fact that we are hyper focusing on a 24-year-old striker that we just bought a couple seasons ago, it's crazy to me. We sound like Manchester United supporters, and it really sucks. Like, the fact that people think that we're going to sell Darwin this summer is so laughable to me, guys. We're not going to do that. Like, nor should we. Unless Slot, like, is very open with Edwards and says, like, look, this guy is just not a systematic fit for me. Like, I can't fit this guy into a system I want to play. That's the only scenario where I see that is happening. And, like, we talk about unrealized potential. We fucking seen it, you guys. Like, we can stop talking about, like, when is it going to happen? We've already seen it. Like before he got benched going into Europa and we kind of fell off a cliff, he had 4 goal involvements in his last 5 games. In February, he had 5 goals in 4 games. Like we can stop talking about it. Like, has he missed a lot of chances? Yeah. Like, so of all the great strike, he's sandwiched between Holland and Watkins for like most chances missed. Like that's part of it. And yet, like, I think there is legitimacy to his percentage being incredibly high for missed chances. For sure. I am not denying that. And I'm not denying that he's missed chances in critical like moments. But the bottom line is like striking is a lot like goalkeeping, where it is so important, like where your form is at. And I think we've agreed universally that he's better starting matches. And so now, like, we've benched him and we're bringing him off the bench and we're evaluating him off the 15, 20 minutes that he's giving us at the end of the season in his worst form. Like, let's fucking stop talking about it because it's ridiculous. Like, I think
did we universally agree on that, though? Or did we say, as of now, initially, didn't we say he's a lot more effective coming off the bench? And we said initially, before Gakpo was playing an 8 and everything like that, and then he just disappeared, that Gakpo was a better fit for the system than Nunez, who was probably more effective coming off the bench and causing chaos.
I personally don't agree with that. I think that he struggles to find his way into a game if you throw him into the middle of it. Like, I think he almost has to find his feet within those first 5-10 minutes, personally. So, I mean, but that's the legitimate question. And that is the question that we talked about. Like, when this signing was announced, we spent 20 minutes of that first pod talking about, all right, how does this guy fit into the system? He played in 5 different formations in 1 year in the Portuguese league, and none of them really like fit what we do as for him being a central striking role. So how does he fit? We still don't have an answer to that question. So like, it's really going to be on Slot to figure out like, what is his role? And I think that's part of the problem, is that he doesn't do things that naturally fit this system. And we never tailored the system to him. We just threw him in it and said, hey, this square shape is going to fit in this round hole one way or the other.
And I think I don't really care as much about his misses. Obviously, I'll be honest, I think somebody was talking about in the comments, but his being offside half the time probably bugs me more than his misses, because I feel like, dude, like, just freaking focus. You're like fastest guy on, just give an extra freaking yard or two and you'll probably beat a defender. I guess the issue is, and we kind of, like you said, Bickler, we talked about this where we were like, how is he going to kick? Oh, well, Club will figure it out. Well, not really. I mean, we never could really use him the way he's probably meant to be used. Because as I look forward, I guess that's my biggest concern, because I still don't see how he fits, unless, honestly, I feel like if it is a 4-2-3-1, and based on, like what you're seeing from like how Slot plays, it almost feels like to me that he's a better fit on the left than he's in the middle, because it feels like Gakpo is definitely a better fit in the middle.
I think, honestly, in Slot's world, if things all break out right and he gets to keep Mo, let's play in the fantasy land that Mo's still here in September of next year, which I don't believe, and I don't think Bickler believes will happen either. But if we follow those pretense, I think the best case scenario is that they find a way that Gakpo and Nunez are playing together. So when Nunez does the Sadio Mane thing and actually comes and cuts in on the left-hand side and comes in on his right foot, you have Gakpo's natural ability to loop around the left and run beyond him and create with that left-hand side. I think I've said this all along. When Mo was out for AFCON, my whole hope was Gakpo and Nunez would learn how to play together on the pitch together. Because I feel like that's the thing that's never been able to happen all year long. And maybe it's because of injury. Some of it's been because of form. But to me, Nunez on the left, Gakpo through the center, maybe Mo on the right. It's probably too attack-minded in a 4-2-3-1, because you have either Harvey or Soboslai or Carvalho or someone playing in the 10. And now you're still asking yourself, like, where's McAllister? Where's Gravenberch? Where do these folks fit into this play? But obviously, I do think that there is so much about Nunez. I just remind people this. I think he just had his 50th or 60th appearance for the club, something like that, or league appearance, something like that. He has the same amount of goal involvement as Sadio Mane did at this point of his Liverpool career. Okay? And Sadio Mane had played 4 years in the Premier League and proven himself, and actually had more expectation on him when he got here at the time to be the savior for Klopp and his big signing. So all of this talk like he is an absolute failure. Oh, and by the way, in his first 40 games for the club, he scored twice as many goals as Luis Suarez. I'm not comparing him as a player to Luis Suarez, but sometimes it just takes people time to bet in. And he betted in a time where Manchester City is winning everything and spitting it in our face. And Jurgen Klopp decides to quit halfway through the season. I think we got to give him one more year, to Paul's point. If they got a real good offer and they wanted to sell him, maybe Edwards would cash in, but they're not going to profit. And you tell me the last time Michael Edwards made a deal where he didn't make money.
And I think that's the thing. But I mean, here's the thing. And I think this is why I look at it totally differently than just like, like numbers and stuff like that. As I watch the games, I just do not see like this is going to eventually click kind of thing, especially in this current system. When we change the system and maybe he changes the location, things will change. I feel like if we kept going like this, if Klopp was staying, I don't ever see this working. Like I'm not like when you say like Mane, for example, you kind of knew what was going to happen. It's going to click more and more and more. Talking about the price thing, yes, and that's I think one reason why he's definitely here. But let me ask you this, Pickler: if money wasn't in the equation, would we keep going at it? Like, will we keep trying it, or is basically you don't want to take a loss now, so you are trying to make it work?
I mean, I think
10 million.
I still think he'd be here next year. I really do. I think giving his production at his age and his duration with this club, like I think you're more inclined to sell Diaz if you're going to sell somebody. Be perfectly honest with you.
I think so too. But that is that because you would get your money's worth. Like you would actually make money.
Yep.
Well, you paid half as much. That helps.
But that's why I'm saying take the money out of the equation. Would we approach the situation the same way? Like just looking at the player, just looking at the production. If money, you're not looking at the right hand side, right columns. Would you make the same?
I think it depends on the manager. But if I'm looking at the situation, like Nunez has things in his pocket that not a lot of players have, like in terms of being physically able to do that we've seen. Like, whereas if you look at Diaz, if you take the pace out of Diaz, which is going to happen naturally in 3 or 4 years anyway, like all that stuff is pretty stock when you look at his game.
Yeah, I mean, Brian says he does deserve a shot with the new manager, and I would also. I think especially as we talk about this more and more, and if we are gonna like do what we, envision, if Mo's staying, like Nunez on the left, Gakpo in the middle, but obviously you can't. Then you have to bring in some new people that's gonna fit slot system to be able to go there. And I guess, I mean, in this sense, if money is out of the equation, I mean, if Nunez, I was talking about this morning, if Nunez was Divock, where you could just bring him off the bench to cause chaos and you didn't look at the price tag, I just don't think with our budget you can afford to have that price tag fill that role because this is not oil money. Let's go to that social media stuff, though. More than the social media aspect of it and how douchey people are. Because like I say, we kind of covered that a lot this morning. How do you think it affects, if at all, his Liverpool career? Or this is kind of like I realize these guys probably face this on and off and stuff. It probably got to a level where he cannot take it anymore, which I don't blame, especially if it's involved his family and stuff. It's one thing somebody to come in the comments and call us like morons or something like that, but it gets a different aspect to it once they start affecting loved ones and talking about like family and stuff like that. But how do you think it affects him, if at all, for the long run in terms of his Liverpool career?
I don't think it honestly does. In some ways, I think it endears him to the fans that are ready to call out the idiots out there. I mean, I don't know if you saw Klopp's comments today. He basically just ripped everybody saying, like, if you're going to talk this way on social media, you're not real supporters. And if you claim you are, we don't want you. You walk alone. You don't walk with us. And you're not welcome in this game or any part of the game. Like, and he says it about opponent players too. And look, death threats, racial epitaphs, like him getting destroyed yesterday for missing a sitter in a game where we're winning at home and people are like literally, guys were defenders, the captain wasn't even paying attention when Son scores the second goal. Virgil is literally just looking at people like he wasn't even yelling at anyone for once because he realized it. Like it it's just terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And the fact that he actually acknowledged it and told people why he did it makes you know how bad it felt for him inside. And I think, I know we're going to do a program on mental health on this network or on this channel coming up soon. And I can't wait to hear about it because I don't think it gets talked about enough. These are still young guys living in a country they can barely speak the language, where they don't know if their girlfriends or partners and mothers of their children who can barely speak the language will be treated good on like the way to the market and back. Or if people will break into their homes when they play a road match 4 cities away. And then they get threats for playing bad on a Sunday afternoon when the club wins. It just feels really weak to me. And I think the weakest part is we have all these warriors, and some of them are even in our own chat trying to make their agendas work better by throwing shade at the fact that he took some pictures down in the uniform because he didn't want to associate with a bunch of people who hate him. I don't know. Seems kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I almost felt like that's kind of like I almost felt like it's kind of like, you know what, take all Liverpool stuff off then to his social media people. Like he's not there like deleting them one by one. Same question to you, Bickler. Do you think it affects it in the long term at all? Or just the fact that we're getting a new manager and everything anyway, it just totally puts a new perspective into the new season for him?
Yeah, I don't. I think... No, I don't. I think it just feels... I think it fuels transfer speculation because of the transition of the time of year, and that's really it. And like, I just think... I don't know. I'm tired of seeing it. I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of people talking about how he's not smart enough, how he's not clinical. I'm just tired of hearing about it because, like, I think there's a difference between being rightly critical of play, in particular, and players, but like, I also think that it requires supporters to have enough intelligence to understand like what runs of forms are happening and why, right? And like when a team is collectively not doing well, it just feels weird to like put it on one guy, especially a guy who's, recently arrived and trying to get this thing going. I'm disappointed there hasn't been more constructive conversation about like what his role is, what he's doing within the squad and like where that needs to go and happen versus just he can't finish. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
like I said, I think it really bothers me just because we've seen that he can. Like we've seen him in good runs of form. Like it's like we've just forgotten about his entire.
And I think that's actually like part of the frustration, though, right? Like you had that Newcastle game. You're like, here we go, there he is. About time. Here we go. And then now it's kind of the floodgates, and really didn't pan out as much as people thought. Then they were like, oh wait, now we're back to square one and stuff like that. And we're talking a little bit about it this morning. You're a striker, so you'll probably I was actually mentioned this morning that this is a question that I will bring to you as a defender, and we've seen this from defenders, right? If you're struggling as a defender, there are times where if you get a guy who's constantly, or you're getting beaten over the top or something regularly, or recently I should say, you kind of cheat a little bit, right? And sometimes when you cheat a little bit to avoid that, you're actually causing even bigger problems because now you're screwing up the back line. And you think things like that when you're a striker. I mean, some of these like ridiculous times that he's offside, is that just more like an accumulation of frustration and trying to overdo too much? Or like, what do you think the reason is? Because I mean, that's like probably the part of this game that frustrates me the most, is that aspect of it. And I think like he's not mentally that strong to be able to keep calm, and he doesn't have that much confidence. And in his own fairness, he's probably constantly evaluating himself, looking at it, coming with Holland. We talked about this before at the same time and all that. If somebody has regular success, you can say, you know what, I know myself, it's going to come back. I think he's just more worried about that. Maybe it's not there. And I feel like he's trying to cheat the reverse way as a striker, and he's offside half the time.
Yeah, I think part of that's an awareness thing. And I think part of it is just, I think it's a developmental thing. Like, I think that's something like within that system that he just hasn't spent enough time Like, I think that he needs time in certain areas of his game that typically they don't have to spend time on with players at this stage in their career, right? Like, that's where I mean, like, parts of his game are retarded because of the way that he came up and through the system that he came up in. Like, when you're coming up through the dredges of Uruguay and then coming into the second division in Portugal, it's a very different experience than being the crown gem and coming up through the Dutch league, right? It's just a very different experience from a technical teaching standpoint, from an education standpoint. And so I think there are areas of his game that are slower that need to be developed in a way that we're not used to seeing that much training and development happening at 24 in the Premier League. So I think that's part of it. I mean, this to me, like, the awareness part is just the flip side of like what Trent does with the back post runner, right? Where we've seen him for 3.5 years, like, fail to recognize there's a guy coming on the backside of this play that I need to pick up, right? I think this is the offensive version of that. I think, because Trent is who Trent is, I think we see like so many of those parts of his games that sort of overshadow that one deficiency. So when the goals and the goal contributions dry up, we're left on this island of Nunez being offside. So I think that's where we kind of land on that one. But frustrating.
So he says, I mean, it's not, I honestly think, I mean, half of it is coaching, like you're talking about, Bickler, but I really think like it's half of it is, as a center back, you're trained not to freaking set the line properly too. That's part of your, that's what you practice. But there are times where your mind takes over your other training and you do things because you're not thinking totally straight, because there are other things running around inside your brain that affects like how you make game time decisions and stuff. I think like one thing that Nick says is true too, though, but the fact that like everybody had a draw at the same time. But what happens is when you have all these players, like when Mo and Nunez can score, well, it's a lot easier to say, well, Mo has earned credit because he scored a ton, whereas obviously the guy has not built credit, and I think that's why he's probably been screwed and probably has been like criticized more than ever, obviously. And I'm totally okay with the criticizing and calling out weaknesses and stuff like that, but obviously taking it to freaking social media and like I don't even understand, like when that happened last night, I'm like, did I miss something? Because I mean, the chance you talked about, Gally, I mean, I don't consider a sitter. It's 1v1. I didn't think, it's not a given.
Certainly wasn't worse than Mo's.
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
which
did I miss something? Because why
was crazy
after that game? Because was somebody like waiting on it, and they were like, "Let me go spill some hate on Nunez." I didn't see anything in the game that I was like, "Yeah, damn it, Nunez!" Like, what the hell? Like, how did people take that away from that game is beyond me.
Because I think, like we have in our Discord channel, and like we have on our Friday morning shows and some other shows that we have right here on this channel, we have people who wait for him to hit a post on a world-class turn and then be like, see, that's the bum that I told you that we have. He's a fraud. He stinks. Like, this is what this fan base has become. We go from one angle to the other, right? Like, there's someone like me defending Curtis Jones and talking about their talent, and there's somebody telling you that he's an absolute fraud and that he was just good for 18 months where he was the best player at the club.
Or there are people like us, me and Bickler, like talking about Bobby and praising him, and
people like me that just think he's terrible. But the truth of the matter is, which never was
like
the case.
Just still posting Bobby appreciation posts 4 years later.
But I mean, but let's be real. We do talk about it. I love but we do use like revisionist history when Nick is up in the comments talking about like Mo couldn't hit a broad side of the barn, and it was Mane and Bobby bailing us out with all these big goals. When we were on this channel talking about how our number 9 doesn't score enough goals, but we don't need him to because he does everything else. Yeah, he scored some big goals, but let's not ever act like Bobby Firmino picked up this team and scored goals at times. Like, he scored big goals and he created them, and let's not like diminish. That was a joke as we were playing off of our comments. but this is what we do. This is what we do. We're at the point now where we literally will recreate stories in our mind to just make our own points. And I'm not taking a shot at Nick. Nick, actually a great commenter, brings a lot to the program and has real opinions. That's what we're always asking. Get your opinions heard. Get them in and we'll tell you that they're wrong. But for me, this season has been a little bit of a string early in the year, it felt like it was literally about Trent. It was about Trent's failures as a right back, as a leader, he couldn't work, right? He gets hurt. Bradley plays like a match and a half of high quality grade football because he's so high wearing 84 playing with adults. And he's like, wow, well, this is what it's like to play with world-class players. And all of a sudden he's world-class and we don't need Trent anymore. Like, I feel like ever since Jurgen said he was leaving, supporters have just rallied around hanging on whatever they could to just like, the story has just changed all year. It's been a cyclical drama from Trent to Szoboszlai to, even early in the year, it was Endo and signing a 30-plus-year-old old bum. And then all of a sudden he was the soups du jour in November, right? And then it just everything just changed and it just kept rolling. And I feel like this season has hit every topic. The only one no one has been willing to talk about is the manager did all of this by making all of this about himself.
I think the biggest issue is when it comes to Nunez, it's just obviously because Matush is people will make excuses for Mo. I think that's what happens is when you compare the two, Mo gets the benefit of the doubt because he's been there, done that, and he scored. So that's what people remember him for. And it's always, what have you done for me lately? Kind of an approach, people take to players and they're like form is not a thing, kind of an ordeal. And obviously, when you're in a situation as an attacker and stuff like that, I feel it's worse. As a goalie, as an attacker, it's feast or famine, Bickler, right? I mean, you're either really good or you're stinking up the place. As a midfielder, you can kind of make some things happen, even though you have 10 freaking bad passes and stuff like that. And a striker can have a shit game and score and just walk off like they didn't do anything. Yeah. And a goalie can freaking save 30 and lets one in. And it's just kind of part of the ordeal overall.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of subtlety and a lot of evaluation in football, especially when we're always looking to point a finger. If you just look at how we evaluate goals conceded, right? We're always looking all right, who fucked it up? Right? We're sitting there looking at this thing and we fail to realize sometimes footballers make fucking great plays, right? You know what I mean? Look at Harvey's strike. Were they slow to close it down? Maybe, but also just a great fucking strike, right? Yes. It's not and I think we do that in a larger scale with footballers in general. When we're not winning, there's always one player we want to go to. It was Henderson for a long time. Before Henderson, it was Lovren. Before Lovren, it was, you know what I mean? We can go, there's always one player that seems to go from, we just stack them. I think it was before Lovren, probably Moreno. And sometimes these players deserve that and it's justified, right? But sometimes they're just in a shit side or they're in shit form or they're just in a shit moment. And I think there needs to be more context and I just think we need to be smarter about how we talk about and have these conversations with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Mittler says about Cause is saying, I mean, that's the thing. I think it's a lot easier to make excuses for, we make excuses for certain people and others we do not, right? And I think based on form and history and stuff like that, that kind of takes his own thing. I mean, speaking of Thiago, for example, Anand for Thiago cannot do wrong. And I think we all have our favorites. And regardless of what they do, we kind of try to look at it with a different type of glass to see it the way we want to see it and stuff like that. But having said that, 2 games to go, kind of talked about the importance. I mean, at least personally to me is I would like it to end on a high note, I guess, Gally, so that it doesn't look totally like wheels coming off, but it's just kind of a rough stretch that we did not recover from. Is that all you're after basically moving forward, since we will have a tough time seeing a performance and saying, he will start in left midfield next year?
Yeah, I think you go to Villa Park and you try to put in a really good shift. They just had a bad result, so you got to imagine that they're going to try to get back into winning ways. I think they're just about guaranteed top 4 at this point, but if Spurs were to lose at the weekend, it is Burnley. But if they were, then if Spurs were to win against Burnley, anything wouldn't shock me right now. But if Spurs are to beat Burnley, then Villa needs something out of this match to guarantee top 4. So Spurs still have a shot of catching them for top 4. So I think we're going to get a good performance out of them. They're a little banged up right now. I just want 2 good performances. And I'll be honest, I want it to be a sunny, beautiful afternoon on Sunday, and I want them to have a great send-off for Klopp. I want this to end with tears of happy joy and not fake fist pumps and happy-go-lucky what would have been tears. Like, they wish they were picking up the trophy, but at least send them out on a performance. And I expect them to send them out on a performance. And it's not like Wolves are playing great right now. So, plus Megan's going to be in the building, and we all know what happens when Megan shows up. They fucking win.
Nick says, I was hoping for an early kickoff. Nick says, why do where did it go? Why do certain people get favoritism? I don't get it either. Like, why does everybody, like, how come everybody loves Bickler, right? Bickler, like, why are you or everybody's favorite?
It's that haircut. Look at that haircut.
Sunny disposition, and the fact that I'm showing all of my forehead now, which makes me very self-conscious. Look at that fucking thing. Jesus, dude.
Good square footage there. So what what are you looking for
in this economy?
Oh God, what are you looking for in the last 2 games?
Yeah, I think Gally kind of nailed it. I couldn't have said it any better. I just wanna enjoy football again, like Shelton says. Like, I think it was like halfway through the first half, and I was like, "This is a good time." Like this last weekend. So like, yeah, I just and even like more importantly, like I just want to see some attractive football, right? Like, and I want to see. I'd love to see some of these guys. Continue to get the minutes of the Gakpos, the Harveys, the Gravenberches, the young kids that are really kind of going to be the cornerstone and the building blocks for this club going forward are the guys that I'd like to see lots of time with.
Yeah, more of this weekend is all I can ask for, because that was finally a fun watch, even though it did get like, oh God, here we go again, vibes at times. It was a good watch. I mean, like I say, I want to see, I guess that's what I will be saying. Like the answer to the question, is it us or was it the Spurs kind of thing? I want to know that it is us. And it was like the drive and kind of like the lack of pressure, having fun again and all that kind of stuff, kind of making this team play like itself as opposed to everybody kind of like tightening up unnecessarily. Go ahead, Gal.
We won't be back before the match, so they'll do a Thursday night show, I'm sure. But do you expect Klopp to start the same team again? It's almost the exact same team that played against West Ham that played like shite, and then he goes back and only subs in Mo. Or do you think he owes it to this squad to say, hey, there's 2 games left and Gomez gets a start and Gravenberch gets himself another start? Like, do you think he should be rotating to give players an opportunity to see out these last couple matches?
Wait, why do you say that? It's next Monday, right? The game
It's Monday. It's a week from. It's not till next Monday.
Yeah,
and then the following Sunday we only have 2 matches. There's plenty of time. But my point is we won't have another show before the next match they have.
You're confusing me with the math. But to answer your question, I think this is the starting 11.
The game comes before our podcast on Monday.
Me and you and Bickler will be on next Monday at 8 p.m. The game is
after the game. Yes. Okay.
After the game.
Let me put that on my schedule. Okay.
Dude, we got to get Timuchin in trivia. He's going to be lost as fuck.
Oh, how the turn.
Yeah, don't ever give me a hard time about asking you about a trivia question for you to repeat it again.
You'll be too lazy to find a trivia question. Let's face it, Bickler.
It's true.
But yeah, my answer to that question would be, I think this is the starting lineup moving forward. Maybe Konate for Kwanzaa or something like that. But what do you think, Bickler?
Man, that's a really, really tough question. And I don't know. Like, I could see... I want to prioritize this team playing well and finishing out well. And that makes me think you kind of go with your best 11 regardless. But there is a part of me that thinks that, like, maybe Klopp is going to put out some of these transition pieces that we're not sure about, or some of these fringe players. I don't know. Like, maybe we start seeing, like, a half and then a start for a Bicetic. I don't know.
Well, I was just going to say, does Bicetic get the last game of the year? Do we need to see Endo 2 more times look a little bit tired ass and run down? Like, do we need that right now? And does that mean that Soboslai can't play or Gravenberch can't play? Do we not want Jones to get any of that rust off before the summer? Like, to me, it feels like we're not in the title race anymore. And to be honest, by the time we play Monday, we will probably be mathematically eliminated from it.
But we will not be on before then, right?
We won't. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I don't know what time.
I guess if we were, I mean, this goes back to what we're watching for, right? If we were looking to build on something, I understand what you mean. And like, you know, like, let's get these guys some minutes, like the raw stuff. But I think the way the season is right now, I just play my best starting 11. And if this was the one against Tottenham, who will get a week's rest, so you can try out the same 11. I would personally put the same 11 because I'm not going to see Jones and be like, oh, good, he's working the rust up. Okay, great. He's going to have 3 months. You know what I mean?
I guess I just look at it where I look at this and I think to myself, like, if I'm Klopp, I'm probably not risking Andy Robertson if I don't have to on the last day of the season before he goes off to play in his final chance to play for Scotland. And there's some of these guys are going off to play in big European competitions. Like, and I know this is their job and this is what they do. To me, when you're not playing for anything and you're locked into your place, I think you'd give some fringe players. Someone in the chat said play everyone, and I basically think in Klopp's eyes that means everyone but Costas gets to play. Costas, no grief.
But go warm up anyway. We never know. Go buy a ticket. Maybe you'll win the lottery, kind of a deal.
Joe Gomez is probably on that list too for some reason.
I mean, I think there'll be a lot of rotation, and you'll see everybody coming in, similar to how Bicetti. You saw, I mean, normally will we see him come in if you were in a title race? I don't think you do. That's, I think, why you see that. That's his gift for, you know, you're back, you're coming to get. You said Gomez and Saidu. It's like a call for Saidu. He just showed up right away. And then we said Jones too, so I'm sure he would show up. But yeah, I don't know. It will be interesting. And we will be on after the game. I just checked my schedule. We'll be on after the game next Monday night. We actually serve as the post-match at the same time. So we will be back then. I'll be back Wednesday morning, even before then, with the Wednesday morning crew. We'll look at the headlines and all that kind of stuff. As always, thanks for liking, chatting, subscribing. Grab somebody by the ear, bring him over to American Scouser, and Bickler will show him a good time, is what I was told. So do that. He's everybody's favorite, and we'll see you guys next Monday. Take care.